Hi guys, welcome back to Tail Air. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do an RNAV approach, so stay tuned and join me in the cruise. Okay guys, here we are established in the normal cruise at 2,000 feet, and we are currently to the north of an airport called Stewart, which is the airport that we're going to be doing the approach into. So here's the approach plate. We're going to be doing the RNAV GPS runway 12 at Witham Field, which is also called Stewart. I'm going to show you first of all how to set this up in the GPS. So if we come down here and have a look at the GPS, what you can see here is that I've already got it set up direct to Stewart. Now I did show you how to do that in a previous video, so if you don't know, check out the Missed Approach ILS video, and that will show you how to set up a direct. And yeah, so what we need to do is click on the approach procedure here. Now if you hadn't set up the direct, then you wouldn't be able to do this, so you need to set up direct Stewart and then click on procedure. Push on the small knob that highlights for you here, then use the big knob to go down to select approach. Push enter, and then you need to select the approach. So we're doing, as I said, the RNAV runway 12. So we've got the RNAV 12 already pre-selected in here, but if it wasn't in there, we use the small knob here, open up this menu, and then push enter once we've highlighted the correct one. We're going to go via the Hadat intersection because that's to the north of the airfield, and that's currently the situation that we're currently in. So we're going to go via Hadat, but again, if you needed to select a different initial approach fix, go down the menu here and select the one that you want. Now this is important, you need to use the big knob here to go down and activate that approach. Now if we go down, if we hold the clear button and go back to the navigation view, we should see that we have some kind of navigation towards Hadat. Should have a magenta line come up, there it is. And what we're going to do now is select the nav function here, which I'm using the autopilot at the moment, and that will start a turn, as you can see, and that will take us towards Hadat. So it's starting that left turn, bring us back onto the magenta line, 7 miles to go until we get to Hadat. That's how you set up the GPS for the RNAV approach. Now what we would have to do as well in real life is to make sure we have something called RAIM available, which is an extra feature on the GPS which allows it to verify the position that it's calculated. That needs a certain number of satellites available, so 4 satellites are required in order to get a position information, 5 satellites required for RAIM, which allows it to cross-check with an additional satellite to make sure the position's correct. Ideally though, you want at least 6 satellites, because then what you can do is cross-check between several satellites, and it can discount any satellites that it feels that it's getting erroneous information from. So that's just a quick rundown on how RAIM works. Unfortunately I can't show you how to check it because the simulator GPS doesn't have the functionality. But that is something to be aware of if you were shooting one of these in real life. So you can see here we've got nearly 6 miles to go to Hadat. So we'll quickly brief the approach. So here's the approach plate again. So it's the RNAV GPS runway 12 at Witham Field, Stewart Airport. We check down the right hand side to make sure that the chart's in date, and then we go up to the top line here. We've got a WASP frequency, which we're not going to be using today. We've got a final approach course of 116 and a touchdown zone elevation of 16 feet, and that will be useful because we're landing on the QNH or the altimeter setting. It's an RMP approach, and you can see here we've got a note saying that circling runway 716253034 is not available at night. Runway 12 helicopter visibility reduction below 3/4 of a statute mile not available. We're not helicopters, so that's not available for us anyway. For uncompensated Barrow VNAV systems, LNAV VNAV not available below -15 or +54 Celsius. Well, we're not going to be using the LNAV VNAV system because this aircraft doesn't have the functionality for it anyway. so we won't worry about that either. So those notes are not applicable to us. We've got the frequencies here, and we're not going to be using these frequencies today. We've got an MSA of 2,600 feet, 25 miles around runway 12. We're currently at 2,000 feet, heading towards Hadda. I'm happy with that. And then we can talk about the route. So we're going to Hadda first of all, which is the initial approach fix that we're going to be entering the procedure from. Then we've got 206 track of 8 miles until we get to Petney, and you can see there the minimum altitude for that portion is 2,000, and the NOPT means no procedure turn. Now if you have a look at Petney here, excuse me, if you have a look at Petney here, you'll see that there's a hold. Basically that NOPT means that we don't have to enter that hold to perform the procedure turn. So after Petney we're going to turn left on a 116 track, and then we're going to head to Maina, and then on the same track to Zevpu, and then to the runway. And then if we have a look in the altitude planning box down here, you can see that we need to be 2,000 feet or above at Petney. We then turn left on a 116 heading towards Maina, where we need to be 1,600 or above, and that's the final approach fix. After that we're going to be coming down a 3-degree path, and then we're going to be crossing Zevpu, and we need to make sure we're at 660 feet or above at Zevpu. If you have a look at the asterisk there, you can see on the right hand side is the asterisk that corresponds to it, and that's for LNAV only, which is the kind of approach that we're going to be doing today. It's just an LNAV with no vertical guidance at all. We've got the runway VDP at 1.1 nautical miles, so you can see that here, and that's basically a point that requires us to be visual if we're going to continue that 3-degree glide path down to the runway. But we do have a minimums here, an LNAV MDA of 420 feet. So if we're not visual, we need to level off at 420 feet. And then we would continue along until we get to the missed approach point, which is the runway, and then we continue to do the missed approach procedure. You can see the missed approach procedure up in the top right here, which is climb to 2,000 feet direct to Leban intersection and hold. So that's what we'll do if we don't get visual, and we'll enter the hold there. You can see on the right hand side of the plan view. So that's basically what we're going to do. We're going to continue inbound towards Petney. You can see we're 6.5 miles from Petney now. We've already passed Hadda while I was talking. The configuration that we're going to be using for the approach is going to be flaps 10 and 80 knots when we get to the final approach fix. And then all I need to do now is make sure we get to Petney, and then start that gradual left turn inbound towards Maina, and then we can start a shallow descent to 1,600 feet, after which point we cross Maina and then go down out on the 3-degree glide path. So we will continue towards Petney now, and what I will do is make sure that I've got the courses set for the current track as well. So this one will be 206 for now, and I'll make sure the heading bug is also set for the current track, because it just makes more sense to have all this set up. It's good for situational awareness, and this doesn't confuse you then. You can see we got 3 miles now, 3.6 miles to go until we get to Petney. Okay guys, so around about 2 miles to go to Petney now. I'm going to take the autopilot off and start flying manually because it's lazy. There we go, so the autopilot's now off, so I'm flying manually. So just keeping the scan going now, attitude indicator down to the DI, up to the attitude indicator, across the altimeter, back to the attitude indicator, across to the GPS. I'm checking that distance. I want to start that turn just before I get to Petney, because otherwise we'll end up flying over it and through the final approach track. So around about a mile before Petney is good to start that turn. So there's about a mile, so I'm going to start rate 1 turn now to the left towards Petney, and I'm going to set my heading bug as well to 116, which I really ideally would have done this ahead of time, but I actually forgot. So 116 is around about there. Keep that rate 1 turn going, and I'm also going to set 116 on the final approach track. Keeping that turn going so we intercept the final approach track as well. That's nearly 116, and there it is. Keeping that turn going. You see I'm pretty much on the final approach track here. Just maybe slightly left of it, so I'll just roll out just a couple of degrees early, and then that will get me on that final approach track. And then once we're established, come to the left a little bit more. Now I can go down to 1600 feet on the way inbound to Maina, so I'm just going to reduce the power by a couple of hundred RPM, let the nose come down. No need to retrim the aircraft, as we're not changing the airspeed, and then I can just allow the aircraft to gradually come down to the 1600 feet platform altitude for Maina. You're slightly left of the track now, so I'm going to just make a turn to the right slightly just to re-establish that course. So keeping the scan going, attitude indicator down to the DI, making sure that heading's sensible. Up to the attitude indicator, across to the altimeter, making sure that we are staying above that 1600 feet for Maina. It's 2.9 miles to go, so there's no need to come down too aggressively. Attitude indicator across to the OBS and CDI there, which is just coming back in now by the look of it. There's the 1600 feet. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pitch up and just retrim the aircraft so that the speed just decreases slightly, and that way it'll mean I can configure a little bit easier for the descent. There we go. There's the CDI back in the middle, so I'm going to come to the left now to re-establish that 116 inbound course. 1.4 miles to go to Maina, so just maintaining level flight for now, correcting that heading bug slightly. And you can see now I'm 100 knots, just over 100 knots. So that's going to be fine now to establish flaps 10. Because the speed limitation for flaps 10 in the Cessna 172 is 110 knots. So that's all looking pretty nice. 0.8 miles to go now to Maina, so we're nearly there. After that time, 5 times the ground speed gives us the rate of descent required for a 3-degree glide path. So the ground speed, I'm going to be flying flaps 10, 80 knots. So with zero wind, that'll be about 400 feet per minute rate of descent. So we'll see how that works out for us initially. And there we go, so we can now establish that. So we're going to set 17 to 1800 RPM, flaps 10, and then just pitch just below the horizon there. Should establish around about 400 feet per minute rate of descent. Maybe a little bit less power, seeing as the speed's taking a little while to come back. Now remember, there's no vertical guidance on this, so you're just making sure that your rate of descent is sensible and that you're meeting the altitude restrictions as you come down the approach. So the next altitude restriction is 660 feet or above at Zevpu. So we need to make sure that we don't bust that altitude restriction. There's probably a car park or a mast on the final approach that they want us to avoid. So we need to make sure that that's not going to be an issue. So I can see I'm a little bit fast here. Rate of descent might be a little bit excessive, so I'm just going to pitch up here and then retrim the aircraft, and that should help us slow down and achieve a more sensible rate of descent. 1 mile to go to Zevpu, and we're at 900 feet, so that's actually looking quite good. So we just continue now down the approach at this rate of descent, and that should just about sort us out. So we've got 800 feet now, 0.5 miles to go to Sevpu. I'd say this looks pretty good to continue a continuous descent. 0.4 miles, 0.3 miles, just keeping that scan going, checking the GPS as well. Now we've crossed Sevpu, we're just continuing down to minimums now, hoping to get the runway in sight. I'm just going to change the view slightly here, and I can actually see the runway lights there flashing off to the left. So I'm just going to now correct the approach glide path so that that's going to be sensible for us to continue. And it's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to slow the aircraft down now to below the white arc speed. There we go. And what we can do now is configure for the landing. So we're going to want 4 flaps. And pitch and power set to continue the approach at around 65 knots. There we go. Set a good landing attitude now. A little bit more power required just to maintain that airspeed and descent rate. And then we just continue down as best we can a 3-degree-ish glide path, aiming to touch down somewhere in the touchdown zone. There we go. So we just ease the aircraft into ground effect here, close the throttle, and hold off. There we go. And that's how you fly an RNAV approach.